it speaks of a tremendous miracle that took place there. And we'll see much of Scripture refers to this crossing of the Red Sea as one of the proof texts that the God of Israel is the true and the living God. And so it needs to be something that is provided the nation of Israel and you and I today with something that has some evidence associated with it. We notice that throughout Scripture, it's a predominant theme. Psalm 66, 74, 77, 104, and 106 all make references to the crossing of the Red Sea as something that was a way God demonstrated His dominion. Of course, Nehemiah chapter 9 also makes reference to this fantastic event. So, it needs to be something that we can test. That's the important thing. It needs to be something that we can demonstrate, that's consistent with the evidence that is available. We then see in Scripture that the children of Israel, after crossing the Red Sea, we get a very detailed itinerary of their travels. We are told that they traveled 3 days to Marah, a place where they found bitter water. Exodus 15, verses 22 and 23. So Moses brought Israel from the Red Sea. Then they went out into the wilderness of Shur, and they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. Now when they came to Marah, they could not drink the waters of Marah, for they were bitter. Therefore the name of it was called Marah. Marah, of course, means in Hebrew, it means bitter. Now, when you look at this particular area across the Straits of Tiran, from the two favored locations of crossing the Gulf of Aqaba, one of the problems with the Nuweiba crossing that Ron Wyatt proposed was that as soon as you are on the mainland of Midian, that western portion of Saudi Arabia, there are no bitter springs within a 3 days walk, and certainly later on no 12 wells, as we will describe later. The southern route, though, has some very interesting facets associated with it. There was two explorers by the name of Bob Cranuk and Larry Williams that in 1989, they made a journey to Saudi Arabia, and coming from the point of the crossing, they discovered about 30 miles, in other words, 3 days' journey at 10 miles a day across just open plains, that there was a very large area of bitter water. Now, the truth of the matter is, this portion of Saudi Arabia has many of these springs which have brackish water that are tainted by the salt water from the Red Sea. There is also another route which has been explored by others, which show that there are bitter springs along the shore of the Gulf of Aqaba. When we look at that, we see the same sorts of information. From the springs of Marah, this bitter water, where Moses, of course, cut down a tree and made the water sweet so that people could drink it, we then are told that they went on to Elim, a place where there were 12 wells and 70 palms. And then they camped by the Red Sea. Now, this is getting very specific, and there should be evidence that we should see from this. We should be able to go some distance and be able to see 12 wells and palm trees, and that they are camped by the Red Sea. When Bob Cranuk and Larry Williams were on their expedition to Saudi Arabia, they did travel another 30 miles or so north, and they came across 12 ancient wells that were surrounded by palm trees. A very small oasis, but nonetheless, there were 12 ancient wells located there. Another explorer went from the point on the western coast of Midian, where there were bitter springs, traveled about another 15 miles, and came to a city of Al-Makna. Al-Makna has also an area where they have 12 wells. The difference being, of course, these 12 ancient wells have the capacity to be able to provide water for a substantial city. The wells found on the journeys of Bob Kernuk and Larry Williams had a little difficulty with those wells being able, at least now, to be able to substantiate and provide water for a large amount of people. But these wells here in Al Makna, certainly as they exist today, are of ample supply to provide for the nation of Israel. And also, of course, more importantly, is this location is along the Red Sea. So again, it begins to map exactly along with the biblical narrative. We then see, in terms of the requirements of the Exodus route, that they go through the wilderness of Sin. Now, the word translated sin here is actually a Hebrew word which means thorns. It is the wilderness of thorns. Later they will arrive at Mount Sinai, which means thorny, the hill of thorns. Of course, one immediately remembers after the fall of man in the Garden of Eden that one of the things that happened as a result of man's sin was thorns entered the world. And of course, we know that Christ, as he was crucified, was crowned with a crown of thorns. And so the children of Israel, taken from the Red Sea, we are told they go through the wilderness of thorns, and they arrive at a place called Rephidim. And it's here in Rephidim where they will experience another tremendous miracle. They will have water from the rock. We read in chapter 17, "Then all the congregation of the children of Israel set out on their journey from the wilderness of Sin, according to the commandment of the Lord, and they camped in Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink." Rephidim is located from Elim on the west coast of Midian, inland now. God is taking them away from the comfort of what they were used to, being along the seashore. He now takes them into the wilderness. And on this wilderness journey, once they cry out to God for food, of course, this is the point at which God begins to give them manna. 6 days a week, they are given food that they have to collect in the morning. Now, what's interesting about this particular route is that following this route to the place which I am going to propose in this presentation tonight as the real Mount Sinai, this route takes them to a place where they are confronted with the ridge of Mount Horeb. Here in Saudi Arabia, there is a ridge of mountains, the tallest being Jebel Alals. The nation of Israel ultimately will camp on the southeastern portion of this mountain, and Moses will go up on the top of the mountain and there meet God and receive the commandments of the Lord and the instructions on the building of the tabernacle in the wilderness. It's interesting to note, though, that Rephidim means a resting place. God takes people into the wilderness to teach them to rest. Why? Because the rest that God has for us is not rest from difficulties, but to learn how to rest within difficulties. And so God takes them there for yet again another demonstration of His miraculous power to provide for them. Now, while they're there at Rephidim, they passed a city which today is called El-Bad. The Bedouins and nomads of that area refer to the city as Midian. And it's known by the Bedouins as the city of Jethro. Now, those of you that are familiar with the story of Moses and his 40 years outside of Egypt prior to going and confronting Pharaoh, you know that he traveled to the land of Midian and he met a man named Jethro and married one of his daughters. Jethro was the priest of Midian. And this area has the reputation of being the city of Jethro. In fact, just north of the city, there's a very interesting